Binge-worthy sci-fi thriller The Gorge, directed by the visionary behind 2025's Doctor Strange. Human-like figures shimmer in a translucent glow, their mutated genes turning them into pulsating nodes on a colossal vine. They sleep and sink, breathing in eerie harmony until Draca accidentally steps on a writhing tendril. The vine jolts awake, countless tendrils lashing out, snaring the two of them just as they were about to cross to the other side. With no other option, Draca fires off their final grenade to save Levi. Levi and Draca, two of the world's top 10 snipers, capable of hitting targets over 3,000 meters away with surgical precision. But Levi's no action hero, a retired soldier haunted by PTSD. He's spent years waking up in cold sweats from war-fueled nightmares. With no family, no friends, Levi's only ritual is heading to the beach at dawn, writing in his weathered journal to fight off the ghosts. For years after leaving the battlefield, a sudden call from the military pulls him back in, but his contact isn't a commanding officer, it's a woman. From her age, sharp attire, and the way even high-ranking colonels treated her like royalty, Levi quickly figured she was some kind of elite intelligence operative. After confirming Levi's clean record, no addictions, no liability, she offers him a classified contract. In early September, with autumn's chill in the air, Levi boards a helicopter bound for his new assignment. For maximum secrecy, he's sedated mid-flight, waking up only minutes before arrival. His phone, watch, and ID are all sealed in a locked case, no outside contact allowed. 3 minutes later, the chopper reaches the edge of a restricted airspace. This is Levi's drop point. After a successful parachute landing, he's still got a 38-kilometer trek north to reach his final destination. After hiking through the wilderness for a full day and night, Levi finally arrives standing at the edge of a colossal gorge. Behind him, distant voices echo. He's not alone. JD, the current caretaker, greets him at the West Tower Observation Station, Levi's home for the next year. The station runs on solar power, with a backup generator and a rainwater collection system for drinking water. A small vegetable patch offers fresh produce, and for protein, Levi's expected to hunt in the surrounding forests.
What's that on the other side?
That is East Tower. Contact with the other side is strictly forbidden.
His primary job, patrol the gorge's edge daily, inspecting and reloading the automated close-in defense turrets, checking the perimeter fences, satellite big ears, and hanging mines. No outside contact except for a single encrypted radio transmission every 30 days to report status. The so-called big ears are actually satellite signal spoofers, planted every kilometer along the rim. Their sole purpose, to broadcast fake data to passing satellites, masking the gorge from the outside world. JD leaves Levi with one final warning: never neglect the big ears. If they all go offline, or if the gorge falls into enemy hands, it triggers Project Stray Dog, a contingency no one wants to talk about.
Stray Dog Protocol. What is that?
No idea.
The West and East Towers had stood since the final days of World War II, relics of a secret pact forged between Eastern and Western leaders to ensure one thing: no one could ever learn the truth about the gorge. Each year, both sides would send a single representative to patrol their half of the gorge, keeping the silence intact. JD casually tossed a timed grenade into the gorge. Seconds later, the explosion was met with chilling, inhuman screams echoing from below.
What the hell is that?
That is what we call the Hollow Men.
Back in the late 1940s, the Soviets sent 2,400 cavalry soldiers into the gorge to wipe out the Hollow Ones. Not a single one came back.
The gorge is the door to hell, and we're standing guard at the gate.
After briefing Levi on all the unspoken rules, JD packed up and left, hiking south for an entire day and night until his extraction chopper arrived. But when Levi eventually completed his year-long mission, a sniper's bullet ended his story. Levi settled into his new daily routine, inspecting the Big Ear's signal stations, checking for missing sky mines, and logging regular reports to command. One afternoon, fresh from the garden with a basket of vegetables, a strange sound cut through the still air, the high-pitched roar of a chainsaw echoing across the gorge. Through his scope, Levi spotted movement at the East Tower. The figure standing there was a woman, and somehow, She felt his gaze from across the expanse. Slowly, she turned. It was Dresa. Night after night, Levi woke from nightmares, only to see Dresa standing alone at her tower, silently staring back across the gorge at him. November came, Dresa's birthday. Alone in her tower, she made herself a crude little cake, lit a single candle, and sang herself a quiet Russian birthday song. Through her scope, she saw Levi, bathed in moonlight, writing something in his journal. She broke protocol, scrawled a quick message on a scrap of paper, and fired a shot into the sky to make sure he noticed. "What's your name?" Levi raised a whiteboard in response. "Direct contact with the East Tower is strictly forbidden." Dresa's next message was simple. "It's my birthday. Rules don't apply today." Levi pulled out a bottle of his homemade potato vodka, raised it high, and toasted to her across the gorge. One small gesture led to another until the invisible wall between them crumbled. Levi even showed off a bit, demonstrating sniper tricks across the 3,000-meter gap. But soon, Dresa would receive a birthday gift from the Hollow Ones themselves. Following her frantic hand signals, Levi scanned the cliff face below. The Hollow Ones were scaling the sheer rock, their twisted forms inching closer. Together, they wiped out every Hollow One near the West Tower, but on Dresa's side, it was already too late. The creatures had reached the East Tower. Gunfire erupted across the gorge. Levi didn't hesitate. Every single shot was a perfect headshot. The chaos activated the West Tower's automated defense turrets, layering on a brutal symphony of gunfire. By dawn, the siege was over. Dresa, bleeding but alive, scrawled a message, "Best birthday ever." They spent the following days patching up defenses, restocking ammo, and laying fresh traps. In December, Dresa's father passed away. Through their makeshift communication, she confessed her grief to Levi. Without hesitation, Levi made a decision he was going to cross. He modified an RPG, stripping out the warhead and turning it into a makeshift zipline launcher. He fired it across the gorge, sending a rope to the East Tower, where Dresa secured it to a sturdy tree. Levi used the rope to make it safely across to the other side. That night, they finally shared a moment of peace, laughter, conversation, and a warmth neither of them had felt in years. But the next morning, as Levi prepared to return, disaster struck. The Hollow Ones attacked again, accidentally triggering one of the sky mines over the West Tower. Shrapnel, razor-sharp and relentless, sliced through the air and through Levi's zipline. The rope snapped. Levi plummeted into the gorge below. Without a second thought, Dresa grabbed her gear and jumped after him. She hit the river hard, the current dragging her downstream, slamming her against jagged rocks until her electric winch broke loose and disappeared into the depths. She drifted downstream, battered by the current, until she finally caught hold of a tree branch and came to a stop. Meanwhile, Levi's fall ended with him tangled high up in the branches of a twisted tree deep in the gorge. But this was no ordinary tree. Its bark was crawling with mutant insects, camouflaged to blend in with the wood. Sensing human presence, the insects stirred awake. Levi drew his sidearm, firing at the writhing bugs while quickly unbuckling his harness. He dropped from the branches, landing hard at the base of the tree, but the ground was worse than the branches. A thick layer of red, glue-like slime instantly latched onto him, holding him in place. Beneath the slime, a skeletal maw slowly opened, its jagged teeth rising toward Levi, ready to consume him whole. At the very last second, Dresa appeared, saving him just in time. Wounded, the creature hissed and slithered back into the tangled roots below. Dresa rushed over, slicing through the sticky slime with her knife to free Levi. The air was thick with swirling yellow fog. They were about to head toward the eastern wall to look for the broken zipline when a series of blood-curdling shrieks echoed through the mist. Out of the fog emerged 3 mutant cavalry riders, their bodies fused with the plants, their horses covered in branches and twisted vines. The grotesque riders charged back and forth, attacking Levi and Dresa relentlessly. Together, they managed to take down 2 of them, but the last rider vanished into the fog. Levi suspected the riders saw them as nothing more than prey. As they inspected the corpses, Levi noticed the uniforms. They were from the 1st Airborne Division, U.S. Army. The uniforms were from the 1940s. Realization hit Levi like a punch to the gut. These were part of the 2,400 cavalry soldiers sent into the Gorge at the end of World War II. But what the hell happened down here to turn them into this? Before Levi could process it all, another disaster struck. Dresa discovered her motorized descender clip was gone. The only piece of gear that could have helped them escape the Gorge was lost. But standing still meant certain death, so they kept moving forward, desperate for a way out. Not far ahead stood the forest of humans, human figures, their legs buried deep in the earth, their torsos twisted into grotesque shapes, their limbs sprouting branches, rooted forever into the land. They pushed through the forest and finally reached an abandoned town. The town was in ruins, every building swallowed by vines and moss. The cracked ground jutted skyward, clear evidence of an old earthquake. The air filled with guttural wails again, forcing them to duck into a nearby church for cover. Inside, long rotted corpses sat slumped in the pews, their bones cocooned in layers of spider webs. Levi knelt beside one skeleton, sniffed a small box in its hand, and recognized the faint trace of cyanide. A mass suicide. They'd chosen death over whatever was outside. Something fell from the ceiling. Dresa raised her flashlight, slowly sweeping it upward. A swarm of skull-faced spiders came crawling straight for them. The spiders poured down in a skittering wave, and as if that wasn't bad enough, several hollow ones burst into the church from the front doors. Trapped between monsters and arachnids, it should have been the end, but the skull spiders weren't picky. They attacked everything that wasn't their own, using the chaos to their advantage. Dresa broke free and fired a grenade launcher round, blowing open a hole in the church wall. They scrambled through the gap, escaping into the open, but the howls were all around them now. Their position was fully exposed. With no choice but to keep moving forward, they pushed ahead until they found an old air raid shelter. Judging by its design, the air raid shelter looked like it had been built in the 1940s. They stepped inside, hoping to find a way out. The entrance was a wreck. Twisted metal beams had collapsed, blocking most of the passage. The only way forward was to crawl through a narrow gap. Dresa had to remove her ammo pack and leave it by the entrance, worried it would get her stuck. After squeezing through the tightest section, they emerged into a wide corridor, just like the outside world. Weird, vine-like plants covered every inch of the walls. At the far end was a sealed laboratory, and inside a horrific collection of deformed human skeletons. Some had fingers stretched over 2 meters long, others had spines twisted into 3-meter coils, and a few had plants sprouting directly from their skulls. The lab's generator ran on propane, and somehow, it was still functional. Levi pulled a dust-covered old-school tape player from under a sheet and found a tape recording. What they heard was the Gorge's darkest secret. At the end of World War II, while Oppenheimer was perfecting the atomic bomb, a different team in this very lab was developing a biochemical missile capable of mass genetic corruption. Then came the 8.6 magnitude earthquake, shattering the facility and releasing the biochemical toxins into the Gorge. Anyone exposed to the toxin for over 5 hours would undergo irreversible genetic mutation within 5 days. Now armed with the grim truth, Levi turned to leave, but something caught his eye. In a side room, a modern computer sat on a desk equipped with a post-2000 LCD monitor. This meant someone had been here recently. On the screen was the logo of Black Lake, a notorious paramilitary corporation. The Gorge, a place that should have been wiped off the map decades ago, was instead secretly preserved by Black Lake. They'd been using drones to harvest mutated DNA samples, all in the pursuit of creating super soldiers. Then came the chilling revelation: Project Stray Dog. If the Big Ear's signal network ever fully failed, or if the Gorge's existence was exposed, Stray Dog would trigger a massive bomb, codenamed Stray Dog, buried deep in the Gorge. Its blast radius spans 4,200 meters, wiping out everything: the Gorge, its secrets, and anyone still trapped inside. As they prepared to leave, Dresa suddenly noticed her ammo pack was gone. They opened the door and found it lying just outside, seemingly untouched. Levi tossed 2 smoke grenades, covering their approach as they carefully retrieved the pack. The second Dresa picked it up, a hollow one's trap snapped shut around her leg. She was dragged across the ground, her side slamming into a fallen tree branch, the sharp wood piercing her waist. Moments later, she was knocked unconscious as her body collided with a tree trunk. Levi followed the trail, eventually reaching a massive missile silo. He knew Dresa was down there. Meanwhile, At the bottom of the silo, Teresa hung suspended by her wrists, bound and surrounded by piles of human bones, all that remained of the Hollow One's victims. One of the Hollow Ones stepped forward, grabbing the branch impaled in her side and twisting it cruelly, jolting her awake with a scream. But in that brief moment of hesitation, Teresa had already cut through the ropes binding her wrists. Levi showed up just in time, taking down the Hollow One with precision fire. The only way out was to cross a narrow sky bridge spanning the silo, but beside the bridge stood a biochemical missile, its casing cracked from the earthquake, still leaking the same genetic toxin that had corrupted the Gorge. Anyone who worked near the missile long enough had been absorbed into the massive vine network, their bodies reduced to pulsating nodes, fused to the living plant. They breathed in eerie unison, asleep, but still alive. As long as Levi and Teresa didn't disturb them, they could slip across the bridge and escape, but the vines were too densely packed. Teresa's foot slipped, brushing against a tendril. Levi slashed through the tangled growth with his combat knife, hacking a path toward the far side, but just as they were about to make it across, a tendril lashed out, wrapping around Levi's leg. Teresa launched herself toward him, grabbing at the tendril, but it was too strong. With no other option, she fired her last grenade, engulfing the entire vine network in flames, the air filled with horrifying, inhuman screams as the burning vines writhed and died. Together, they fled the silo, emerging into the open air. Before them stood an abandoned military outpost, its storage yard home to a rusted, tracked Jeep, old, but still armed with a heavy-duty winch. It was the exact equipment they needed to rig a new zipline, their one and only chance to escape the Gorge. Teresa fired up the tracked Jeep, steering it toward the eastern cliff under Levi's guidance, searching for a way to reconnect the zipline.
There, that's it.
Levi secured the zipline to the Jeep's winch, while Teresa held off an incoming wave of Hollow Ones, their twisted forms charging through the mist. With the Jeep's engine roaring at full power, the winch slowly began reeling them upward, hauling the Jeep and themselves toward the top. But just as they breached a thick cloud of smoke, the Jeep's power suddenly dropped. Levi glanced down. Another swarm of Hollow Ones had latched onto the zipline, climbing upward, dragging the Jeep's weight back down. With no time to reload, they switched to close combat weapons, slashing at the creatures clinging to the line. More and more Hollow Ones swarmed them, and without firearms, they were quickly overwhelmed. Teresa shouted a last-ditch plan: ignite the backup propane tanks mounted on the Jeep. Levi stabbed his knife into the metal canister, rupturing it and dousing the creatures below in liquid propane. Then he struck a flare, tossing it into the crawling mass. The instant the flare hit the propane, a fireball erupted, engulfing the Hollow Ones and triggering a massive explosion that rocked the entire cliffside. Levi's leg was crushed under the Jeep's weight from the blast. Teresa hauled him onto a narrow ledge, severed the zipline, and let the burning Jeep and the remaining Hollow Ones plummet into the abyss. By then, they were close enough to the ground, and with their military climbing skills, they successfully scaled the rest of the cliff. Reaching the East Tower, they had no family, no real ties to the outside world. Fate threw them into the Gorge, and through hell and back. They became lovers. Teresa proposed a plan after they destroyed the Gorge. They'd disappear together, living in seclusion in a quiet village in France. But first, they had to end this nightmare to stop the Hollow Ones from ever escaping and to keep Black Lake from turning this genetic horror into a global bioweapon. Teresa rigged a new zipline, sending Levi back to the West Tower, but their presence in the Gorge hadn't gone unnoticed. The same elite agent who'd recruited Levi was watching.
Commander, Levi Kane is compromised. Gather your team, we'll leave in the morning.
The lab's computer had already recorded everything they'd done. The next morning, Levi and Teresa planted explosives on their respective big ears, preparing to blow the whole network and trigger Project Stray Dog. Just as they finished, the elite agent and her strike team arrived at the West Tower in a military helicopter. Levi shouted, "Run!" and the two of them bolted into the forest, their distance counters ticking with every step. The agent ordered drones to track them down. Levi and Dresa kept running, only stopping when they'd reached 3,800 meters, the maximum range for a precision sniper shot. They took position, crosshairs locked on the explosives they had planted. 2 perfect shots rang out, detonating every big ear tower along the gorge. With the network gone, Project Stray Dog automatically activated. Deep below the gorge, the Stray Dog warhead began its 2-minute countdown. The agent and her team scrambled to evacuate, their chopper lifting off in a panic. Stray Dog's blast radius was 4,200 meters, and Levi and Dresa were still inside the danger zone. They had only 400 more meters to run to clear the blast radius. With every ounce of strength, they sprinted towards safety. Behind them, Stray Dog detonated, a cataclysmic explosion that obliterated the gorge, erasing the Hollow Ones and all of Black Lake's twisted genetic experiments. The mutant super soldier program died with the gorge. Dresa made it crossing the 4,200-meter line just in time, but Levi, slowed by his injured leg, couldn't keep up. The shockwave hit him, blasting him off the cliff and into the waterfall below, his fate unknown. Dresa stood at the edge, staring back across the destroyed gorge, silently praying Levi had somehow survived. They had made a pact: if either of them survived, they'd spend 5 days alone in isolation, watching for signs of genetic mutation. If symptoms appeared, self-termination was the only option. Dresa retreated into a mountain cave, carving a mark into the wall each day. On the 5th day, with no symptoms, she knew she was safe and left the cave. She made her way to Aze, a quiet village in France, the place they'd promised to meet if they both survived. Every day, she waited at their agreed spot. Every day, her hope faded a little more, until 4 months later, as she carried a tray of drinks for a customer, she turned and froze. Sitting at one of the tables was Levi, alive, watching her with a familiar smile. In his hands was a scrap of paper, just like the first message they ever exchanged. On it, Levi had written his order, using the same words they once shared across the gorge.